Well, my friends, that's one Jewish root of the first half of the tribulation. There's another one found in chapter 11 here, Revelation. Let's turn there. Revelation chapter 11, the first 4 verses. Now, these are the 2 witnesses, the 2 Jewish witnesses. Verse 1 of chapter 11, Revelation, and there was given me a measuring rod like a staff, and someone said, rise and measure the temple of God and the altar and all those who worship in it. And so John is to be measuring with a reed. Reed is about 10 feet long, to measure the temple of God. Verse 2, but he says, and leave out the court which is outside of the temple, and do not measure it, for it has been given to the nations, and they will tread underfoot the holy city for 42 months. Well, the court that he's not going to measure is outside the temple. That's the court of the Gentiles. It's interesting because it says this court, or the outside of the temple, is going to be given to the Gentiles or the nations. And they're going to tread underfoot the holy city for 42 months. Well, I believe that 42 months is the second half of the Jacob's trouble, and that they're going to be trampling upon the city of Jerusalem at that time. Well, that makes sense to me because Anti-Messiah at mid-trib is going to start his attack upon the Jewish people and, of course, the whole world. We'll get to that in just a moment. Verse 3 now. And I will grant authority to my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days clothed in sackcloth. So these 2 witnesses are just like the prophets of the Old Covenant, the Jewish prophets. They wore sackcloth, camel skin, preached the gospel, the good news message of God to the people. Now, I believe that they are going to be prophesying in the first half of the tribulation for 1,260 days. Now, there's always an issue with the 2 witnesses. Who are they? A lot of believers think that the 2 witnesses are either Enoch, Elijah, or Moses. But I believe that none of those 3 are these 2 witnesses. I believe just there's going to be 2 Jewish witnesses, prophets from the future that God is going to pick. Now, verse 4. These are the 2 olive trees and the 2 lampstands that stand before the Lord of the earth. Verse 4 is actually taken from Zechariah chapter 4, which talks about the vision that Zechariah received from the Lord, the 2 olive trees and the 1 lampstand. And so John is taking from that, making application to his situation here. He's saying the 2 olive trees and the 2 lampstands, they are representing these 2 witnesses that are going before the world, preaching the good news message from Jerusalem. And guess what? The world hates them. The world hates them. Some of the people of the world actually try to do damage and do harm against those 2 witnesses. And guess what happens? Fire proceeds from their mouth. The rest of this chapter talks about this. Finally, at the end of this, by the middle of the tribulation period, Anti-Messiah then kills the 2 witnesses. For 3.5 days, their bodies are laying there in the streets. The people of the world have a party. They're rejoicing that these 2 had died. Can you imagine that? They're having a big old party around the world, but after 3.5 days, God resurrects these 2 witnesses to life right before everyone. And then he says, come on up here. And then they are raptured right before everybody's eyes, and they float right on up to heaven to be with the Lord. It's a wonderful witness to the world, and is another wonderful Jewish root aspect of the first half.